You have to move. You have to get going. Do something, even if it's imperfect, right? Go and do 10 push-ups right now as you're listening to this. Do something that gets your body going. From a chemical standpoint, your body will begin to produce endorphins or dopamine. You'll have this rush, and that will change the way you're feeling. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to this week's episode of Conquer the Day. I am your host, Brian Pickowitz.
And I am your host, Lindsay Pickowitz.
And today we're talking about how to get out of the funk. So if you are someone who feels low, feels like, hey, no matter what I do, I can't seem to get myself moving in the right direction, we want to give you 4 practical steps that will help you reverse that state and start making progress toward your greatest goals.
Absolutely. And the worst part of a funk is that no matter how many times you try, you tend to feel like you're still running in place, right? You're putting in effort, you're putting in energy, and you just keep hitting wall after wall after wall. Eventually, it becomes a whole state of being, a whole mindset. You're like, I'm just in a funk. I'm just in a funk. And what's challenging about saying I'm just in a funk is that almost implies that it's just going to stop at some point. Mm-hmm. It's just going to disappear. It's going to go away. It's going to get better. And a lot of times it doesn't.
Well, and nothing changes unless we change, right? Things don't get better unless we decide to make them better. And if we're in that rut and we're in that low state and we're feeling like, hey, we're hitting defeat after defeat after defeat, or we're not making progress, which feels like defeat, it's really important that we stop and assess, what do we have to do to change? And this happens for us all, right? It's really easy, especially when things seemed like they were going in a certain direction, it felt like you were on top of the world, felt like you were indestructible, to all of a sudden have this low point where you're like, man, I don't know what I have to do to get myself moving again. It feels like I can't get a win. And it's so important to recognize when we're in that state, because if we don't catch it, then it will persist. And then one bad week, one bad month becomes one bad year. And then all of a sudden we're 5 years down the future and we're saying, hey, how the hell did I get here? It happens to so many people. And so if you're in that place where you've maybe had a few different defeats, a few losses, or you just can't seem to get out of your own way, we want to give you some practical tips that will help you start moving in the right direction, and also share some different experiences that we've had, because we are also human, meaning we've had experiences that have felt like, hey, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to get moving again? It feels like no matter what I do, things aren't going in the direction I want. And those experiences, although they're painful, can be some of the greatest lessons. And so these are some lessons that we've seen manifest in our life and also for countless amounts of our clients. And we thought it would be a really helpful topic, especially as we're getting out of the new year, right? We're
getting into the new year.
Well, we're out of the new year season, right? So most people, they set big goals for the new year. They have all this intention, all this ambition. And then for a lot of them, when it comes to February, they're like, I really didn't show up the way that I wanted to. I had the greatest intentions, but things fell apart. And so you might be feeling like you're in that funk right now.
Especially in the depths of winter.
Yeah. And this is how you'll start setting yourself up to get out of that state as you approach spring and really, hopefully, the rest of your seasons here on Earth.
Where we want to start is with a contrast. How not to get out of a funk. What do you do if you want to stay exactly where you are and cause as much pain for yourself as possible? The reason that we want to start with this is because it's going to make it so much more obvious that you actually can get out of this pretty quickly if you know what to do, which is where our 4-part process for getting out of a funk fast is going to be helpful. But if you would like to stay in your funk just a little bit longer, you want to marinate in that juice for as long as you can, here is exactly what you'll do. And I'll tell this through a story of when I chose to stay in a funk without really intending to. It was 2018, and I was just starting to get into the level of my coaching practice where I started to realize that sales was actually a really important part of it. You had to actually sell your service in order to help more people. This was not a skill set I had ever built or intended to build or really needed to have in any part of the career path I had chosen previously to coaching. And I remember it so vividly because it was so painful. It was September, I believe, of 2018. And we had just had this major high where we were hired to live with one of our clients in Dallas, Texas. We had been flown out from Los Angeles to live with them for a month and provide this very high-class service and high-touch service to them. And in this month where we're on this high, I'm still trying to run my coaching business, and I was really struggling with sales. And I would get on these conversations with people. I'd feel like they were such a great fit and I could really help them, and I'd lose the sale. In 1 week, maybe 2, I lost 8 sales in a row. Every single sales call I got on was a failure. And I remember just thinking to myself after each one, I'd sit and like sink really low in my chair and think, okay, that was what happened? That was awful. What? And I was just bamboozled, like baffled. I had no idea what was wrong, what was going on. I figured, all right, well, I guess I'll try again. I've got another one later or another one tomorrow. All right, I'll be better next time. But I wasn't sure why I was failing in the first place. So that was problem number 1. But this just perpetuated until I lost, again, those 8 sales in a row. And I just felt so defeated. So defeated. And at the end of this spell, it ended up being a whole month of a funk, if not 2 months or 3 months. And I just got to the end of these 8 sales calls and I just had like a total mental breakdown. I was like, everything is failing. I am terrible. I am not meant to be doing this. I want to throw in the towel. And I just felt like the biggest failure in the world.
I remember when I think it was the same time we got back out to LA. You were questioning like, oh, maybe I should get a barista job. Like maybe
maybe I probably was.
Maybe I should go work at a coffee shop. This isn't for me. And I remember that experience simultaneously having my own experience on the other side.
Yeah.
I do remember you being there and what you thought your options were.
Yeah. So basically this is how not to handle a funk. You don't take time to really analyze and figure out what has gotten you here. You assume that if you just keep trying, things will magically get better. So you keep repeating the same actions and you produce, therefore, the same result. And instead of seeking any type of counsel or guidance, you just kind of bury yourself into a pit and say, man, I just need to get myself together. This is just terrible. You need to figure this out. And you beat yourself up thinking maybe, just maybe, that will get you to do things differently. Mm-hmm. So if you'd like to stay in a funk for a very long time and cause a mental breakdown and pain, that is precisely what I would suggest doing.
And it looks the same way if you're stuck in a funk with your fitness, your health, any different area. You're going back to the same model and you're not changing the strategy and you're expecting it to work. It's like, well, this program that I've tried 3 to 5 times, it worked one time, right? Which is what happened to you.
Yeah, because I had done well in the past. I had seen success.
You had helped people.
Sure.
You were producing results, and then all of a sudden you weren't producing results, and you're like, oh well. And that's what happens, right? We think that the strategy works no matter what the season is, and it's like, well, that strategy worked in a season where this was happening, and now seasons have changed. You need a new strategy. The example would be like, oh, well, you didn't have kids. Mm-hmm. For someone who's struggling with their fitness. Well, I didn't have kids. I didn't have this career, this job, and I was able to work out 6 days a week. I was able to meal prep. I wasn't on the phone as often, so I was able to go out to restaurants. Whatever it was that you were doing consistently has changed, right? Because your seasons have changed. And now it's like, oh, well, I guess I have to go back to that old program or that old approach in order to get results, knowing that the season that you're in requires a new approach. The season that you're in requires something different. And if you keep trying the old thing, expecting new results, it's not going to work. And
I think the what I would tie that down with is like, you have to first recognize that you're in a funk and things are not working in at a larger scale before you can implement the steps we're going to give. And you have to want to change it. right? Because if you think, oh, it's just going to get better and that's your assumption, you're not going to recognize, one, that you're in a funk, or two, that you need to actually intentionally change it. You're going to think it's just going to happen, which produces more disappointment.
Yeah, and then that cycle, again, just gets repeated over and over again. And then you end up as a barista.
And then you end up as...
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
But you didn't want to be a barista.
No, I didn't. So, yes. But with that said, there's a very clear trajectory that will get you out of a funk a lot faster and with far less pain. It will still be a growth process. It will still challenge you to your core, most likely, but it'll be for a brief moment. It'll feel like a blip in your journey if you can implement these 4 steps fast.
Now, the 4 steps you're going to follow in this process are really simple, and they're something that you're going to want to repeat daily. But the more you start to see how good you feel when you implement these strategies, the more, let's say, the easier it is for you to follow through. Now, if you're in a funk, the first thing you want to do is you want to change your state. You want to move. You want to do something that gets you into your body. And if you think about the state you're in when you're in a funk, it's very low. It's defeat. It's sadness. It's this blanket that we wear that keeps us feeling like no matter what we do, things aren't going to get better. And so if I'm in a funk, the first thing I have to do is I have to change my body. I have to go and do something physical. That physical response from a chemical standpoint in our body actually allows us to feel better. And so when you think about it, the first thing, no matter what's happening, go and move your body. Get a workout in. Go outside. Just show up at the gym. Change your environment, right? You can also think of changing your state as changing your environment. If you've been working at home, but maybe you go and work at the coffee shop that day. If you've been trying to work out from home and it's not happening, well, go sign up for a gym and show up and do the treadmill for 30 minutes. Do something different and do something that allows you to feel different. Now, a lot of people change their states when they're in a low, but they do it through chemicals. Right? They do it through drinking, they do it through drugs, they do it through watching things on YouTube. They have these artificial ways of creating a change in our state. And that actually perpetuates the problem, because as soon as the drugs wear off or as soon as the stimulus is gone, we feel just as bad. And you can think about it with someone who's scrolling through Instagram. You don't feel better after you're done. So the key is understanding that if we want to change how we're feeling, you have to move. You have to get going. Do something, even if it's imperfect, right? Go and do 10 push-ups right now as you're listening to this. Do something that gets your body going. From a chemical standpoint, your body will begin to produce endorphins or dopamine, and you'll have this rush, and that will change the way you're feeling. And that's the first place that we want to start.
Second place we want to go from there, once we've changed our environment and changed our state, if we want to get out of a funk, we need to seek new perspective. The challenge with being in a funk is that your world is seen through the lens of I suck or everything sucks. And if that is your lens, it's very difficult to have hope and optimism that things are getting better. It's hard to even see the things that are going well. Because even when you're in a funk, there's still plenty of things, I guarantee, that are going well that you could lean on, but your focus is just blurred. So in order to get out of that funk, that second step is to seek new perspectives, and specifically seek a new perspective through a mentor. Doesn't mean go talk to your best friend or your parent. Talk to somebody who's been there. Talk to somebody who has been through it. And maybe it's not talking, maybe it's consuming from a mentor. Meaning reading a book or listening to a podcast. It's something that really reignites your fire for life, or it reignites your inspiration for what you're doing. You have to talk to somebody or read from somebody or be in conversation, quote unquote, with somebody who's been there. It makes a world of difference and changes your perspective, which can change your life.
And then the third thing, right? So we've changed our state. We've had a new perspective. The third thing we want to do is we want to create a small win. And so if you're in a funk, it's easy to allow losses to accrue. But if you can focus on the smallest win possible that allows you to feel like you're moving in the right direction, what happens is you start to get momentum. And for myself, I'll use a little story here to kind of personify this. there was a point about a year after Lindsay had her low point where I had a perpetual cycle of defeats. So one thing had happened inside our businesses. I tried to solve it with hiring mentors and bringing new people on, hiring employees. I wasn't a very good manager at the time. You don't know what you don't know. And that led to colossal failure at the time. And at the time, we found ourselves in, I want to say, like $30,000 in credit card debt because we had financed the growth of this company through debt and thinking, hey, revenue will pick up to it, and revenue didn't. So I felt like such a failure. And I remember the depression and the sadness and the lowness that came with moving from Los Angeles to Dallas, expecting there to be more growth on the other side and experiencing nothing but pain. And I remember at that time we were living around this lake, and there had been this poster up that said, hey, half marathon, half marathon, half marathon. And I would go out and jog during the summer, and I kept seeing the sign. I was like, oh, maybe that's something I want to do, but I didn't really have a pull to do it. And I remember I just had this last big defeat in a series of multiple defeats. And I realized, like, I need to do something different. And I remember signing up for that half marathon thinking, I've never run a half marathon. I knew my body could do it, but I've never done a race like this. I want to do it. I want to challenge myself. And I remember showing up for that half marathon and pushing my body so insanely hard. And I got done. I think I ended up running like a 7:58 for the marathon, half marathon pace. And I felt like a champion. I felt invincible. I was like, wow, like I just literally pushed my body so insanely hard. And it was this huge win that really was only a small win in a moment in time. And what was so remarkable about that is it didn't fix our finances. It didn't gain us more business. It didn't do anything to help us in that regard. But it allowed me to find something that gave me confidence again. And so if you're struggling and you're feeling like you're in a funk, find the smallest target that you can hit that's going to feel like it's a win. That's why we say start with your body. Mm-hmm. Change your state. Change the way your body's feeling. Do something physical. But it also might be, hey, maybe I need to do something different in my business. Maybe I need to do something different in my relationship. How can I produce a small win here? How can I do something that allows me to feel better today?
Now, step number 4 is what ties it all together, especially when you're thinking of these 4 steps as a daily practice at first until you get out of a funk. So step number 4, if you want to get out of a funk, is you have to recalibrate your focus. Recalibrate your focus. What does that mean? It means you have to remind yourself of what your result is. And if you don't really know and you haven't really set up any type of result or goal for yourself, then recalibrate is just calibrate, right? It's calibrate for the first time. You need to know what you're going after, and you need to remind yourself of that daily. What are you going after in your business? What are you going after in your fitness? What is the outcome that you're seeking for your growth and improvement right now? Mm-hmm. If you can recalibrate, respect, and re-engage with the goal that you have, you are going to be so much more successful than if you set it and forget it and never think about it again.
Yeah, and the thing about recalibrating is assessing where you thought you should be at this point and assessing where you are, right? Because let's take fitness, for example. Let's say you had this plan of getting in shape in 12 weeks. Well, you kind of screwed up the first 6 weeks. It's like, okay, well, you're not going to make up for 6 weeks in 6 weeks. Stop trying to do that. That's not helpful. But based off of where you currently are, how much progress do you want to make in 6 weeks? Or can you recalibrate and say, hey, my next goal is now it's 12 weeks from here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? Okay, I couldn't do it in this 12 weeks. Things happen. I'm going to recalibrate my focus and say, this is where I'm actually at. This is where I want to be 12 weeks from now. Yep. And that allows you to resituate your focus on how you're going to approach this series of weeks. And it's so important because you also want to assess with that recalibration of focus, what did those 6 weeks teach me? What didn't work, right? When I was trying to do this, well, what led to failure? What led for me to not get the results that I want? Mm-hmm. So being able to walk through that practice of recalibration, okay, where am I? Where do I want to be? What's realistic right now? What have I been trying to do that hasn't been working? These questions lead you to diagnosing the problems that you can solve, designing better systems around those problems. And then what's great is you start almost like you cut off the past and you start from this point forward. And now you can move towards where you're really wanting to go.
Mm-hmm. All these steps combined will get you out of a funk really fast. And it's not that you need to place that expectation on yourself that if you've been in a funk, let's say you had a series of challenging events over the course of 3 years, you don't need to expect that you're going to be all better by tomorrow. But we just want to show you what's possible when you really master these 4 steps. So I actually fell into a funk in November of last year, so not that long ago. It was post-wedding. We had just moved across the country. We had been here for a few months. We had started to settle in, and I just found myself feeling very low and almost like depressed. Like I didn't want my morning routine to end. I didn't want to start work. I didn't want to, I felt like I was kind of dragging myself into the work that we were doing every day. And the moment I recognized I was in a funk, I started this process, this 4-step process. The first thing I did was I thought to myself, okay, what do I need to change? Well, let's at least get a workout in today. And then I thought, well, who can I reach out to? And immediately the first person that came to mind is one of our mentors who's actually going to be on the podcast in a couple weeks. But I thought of her. I was like, okay, she's definitely been here. She's been in business for 40 years. She knows what, not 40 years, 30
She's
years?
not that old.
She's not that
Like 25, 20 years.
But she's been in business for a decade or more than me. So I was like, okay, she's the first person that comes to mind. I'm going to go for a walk again, change my state. I'm going to call her. So I called her. She gave me some perspective. She reminded me of all the different events of my life that have happened, that I was on such a high after the wedding and our honeymoon, and that it's a pretty normal slump to fall into, and that she had fallen into one just like it herself after she got married. And when her business was having a challenging time and it was difficult. So she gave me that new perspective. And then from there, I was like, okay, well, that was actually a win. That conversation in and of itself was a win. I started to feel like, okay, I'm solving the problem. So I looked for a win even in that conversation. And then from there, I had to recalibrate myself every day to where I wanted to be. So I wanted to not feel apathetic. I wanted to feel powerful and excited and inspired by what I was doing and the work that we were doing. So every day I woke up and I did something that put me into that state of energy, excitement, and enthusiasm. It started with a couple days of just doing some sprints in the morning. And then I shifted to doing something called incantations, which we talk about in our episode that came out 2 weeks ago with Danny Eisenbarth. But I started going for walks and saying out loud that I was this powerful person and I could do this. And I started just really building myself up. And that's how I recalibrated every day. And it took, I would say, 4 to 5 days to get out of that funk. Gone. I felt inspired and excited, and my state was basically reset. But I had to be very intentional. So that's kind of how it can come together if you really see those 4 steps coming to fruition. It requires action.
And the key with this whole process is repeating it daily. Right? There's days where I wake up and I feel so low. Not for any particular reason. It's just, hey, I wake up, energy feels a little bit different. Okay, well, I need to move. I need to seek a perspective that's greater than mine. That's where a great book comes in. Because when you read, you're spending time with the author. And so ask yourself, whose life do I want to model? Who do I want to learn from? And sit down with that book. That's a totally different perspective. And then the small win might come from any of the work that's laid out that day. For me, it might be a workout for that case in point. But there's something that is a win that I can say, I did that. That's moving me forward. And then continuing to recalibrate focus is, what are the goals? Where are we moving towards? How are we moving closer towards where we want to be? What do we have to continue to innovate? And so this daily process allows you to move through big funks and little funks, right? It allows you to get through any state that is not empowering you to be your best. And that's how you can think of a funk. This isn't how I feel when I am charging forward towards something that I know is making myself, my business, my team, my family, my company, my country better, right? And then from there, you can assess, how do I keep repeating these processes again and again? So if you start with changing your state, if you look for mentors or perspectives that empower you, if you focus on the small wins, and you keep tracking your focus and recalibrating how you're doing towards your ultimate vision or your success, then you'll see the snowball effect, and then it becomes a perpetual cycle that you can live in, and that's how you really create the momentum that you want.
We hope that this has been helpful for you. Again, these 4 steps are something that you can implement daily until you feel like you have really gotten your fire back. And even once you have your fire back, we encourage you to continue to be mindful with these 4 steps so you can watch your state and make sure that you are consistently moving towards where you want to be. A couple of areas of caution here as we close out. When you're looking for perspectives, remember that proper perspective is key. Mm-hmm. If you wouldn't trade places with the person who you're seeking perspective from, you should not be seeking their perspective on this particular area of your life.
Mm-hmm. If someone's not healthier than you, asking them what you should do to get healthy is probably not the right mechanism for your progress, right? Mm-hmm. So you go to someone who's less healthy than you, they'll tell you, oh, you're fine. Look at me. Look how unhealthy I am. It's like, that's not helpful.
Yes. So proper perspective is key. Second, if you are looking at what you can do daily to put yourself into a better state, kind of like some of the options and examples we gave you, make sure that the actions you choose are in alignment with that goal you've calibrated. So for me specifically, I wanted to feel powerful and energized and excited. So the action I chose, like going for a sprint outside or doing a power walk, that made me feel powerful. If you want to feel peaceful, mm-hmm. you should not go power walk and sprint, right? Like that, unless that happens to make you feel peaceful, it doesn't make me feel peaceful. Pick something that's in alignment with how you actually want to feel every day and be really intentional with that. I see a lot of people do it out of alignment, and they get disappointed because they're not feeling any better, mm-hmm. right? If you're feeling super anxious and you want to feel peaceful, employ actions that actually make you feel peaceful, and it's going to be helpful.
And the last piece is meet yourself where you're at. Give yourself grace. Don't beat yourself up, but also don't tolerate this experience. Don't tolerate the funk. Don't tolerate how you're feeling and telling yourself, hey, this is just the way I am, because it doesn't have to be this way. You can change. And one of the most important pieces of this all is a desire to change. Yep. So again, seeing that this is a state you're in is okay. You've been here. You're a human. Humans are allowed to experience emotions, and you are just experiencing this emotion. But you do not have to stay this way. And so deciding that you're going to change and taking the small steps, meeting yourself where you're at and taking those small steps forward is the best mechanism for you to start to get out of that rut and not make things worse.
Yep. And that's pretty much all we've got for you. And we would love to hear your stories of how you got yourself out of a funk. So do us a favor, screenshot this episode and share it on your stories and tag us. Let us know, okay, this is your plan. This is what you got out of this. Here's how you plan to start employing these 4 steps. Mm-hmm. And more than anything else, we're grateful you're here. We're grateful that you're taking the space to actually assess what's going on for you and what you can do differently. So we're proud of you. We're excited for you to take these next 4 steps and get yourself out of this funk and back into your power. And lastly, as we leave you, be sure to either subscribe if you're on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and make sure that you can get notified every time that we do put out these episodes for you to keep you in that great place and get you on your A game.
And if you made it to the end of this episode, like Lindsay said, screenshot it, shout us out, or on YouTube, let us know in the comment section what your big takeaway is and what you can implement now. But we hope this is helpful. We hope this gets you in the groove, in the mood, in the focus to really be your best, to get out of the funk and really create more of the results you want. So on that note, I'm Brian Pickowitz.
And I'm Lindsay Pickowitz.
Go out and conquer your day.
Cheers.
Cheers.